All right, good morning, everyone. How are you? Commissioner Joseph, can you have a seat, please? We're calling the meeting to order. Marlene?
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, Commissioner Joseph,
Here.
Vice Mayor Alex Lama,
Here.
Commissioner Stovesnat,
Not here.
Commissioner Viscara,
Here.
and Mayor Svechin.
Here, thank you. Okay, before we start the discussion, we have a few people in the audience, so this is a workshop. There's no public comment. However, if you wanted to give any input or have any questions, you can email the city clerk. It's going to be on the screen, the email, or afterwards you can speak to the city manager or any of us. And then also I'm asking for the commission so that to reserve your questions until you're called on so that we have the best time to allow everyone to ask all of their questions. This is a pretty important meeting, so I want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to be heard. And with that, please go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioners. The last time that we discussed the Town Center North Vision was this past summer in July of 2024. And today we welcome back Caitlin Forbes and Jeff Kadams with Complete City Planning Group to further explore the Commission and the city's desired vision for the study area. The goal this morning is to receive direction from the Commission so that way we can create a vision document for Town Center North, which will then come back before you for adoption. That vision document will then inform the future policy and code amendments that will codify that vision. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Caitlin and Jeff.
Great, thank you. Let the PowerPoint get queued up here, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, Mayor and members of the Commission. As Amy mentioned, as a reminder, Caitlin Forbes and Jeff Kadams with Complete Cities for the record. We're very excited to be here with you again, specifically on the Town Center North visioning process and project that we have been working through for the last year and a half or so. As you'll remember, last summer we started a workshop process with you to talk about some of the specifics after we went through a pretty robust public engagement process. So since that's been a little bit of time, I'm going to start our presentation today by reminding you some of the highlights of the project, the process that we've been through, and some of the key decision points that we've asked you to make to date. And so that'll be the first part of the presentation, and then we'll get into the second part where we'll look to you to have some discussion and some back and forth on some of the additional decisions that we're requesting direction on today. So just as a reminder, of course, as it relates to the Town Center North project specifically, we were tasked with identifying some challenges and opportunities within Town Center North, and particularly as it relates to today's topic, determining whether that original Town Center North vision still stands, whether it's still appropriate for the area given kind of the history and development patterns that have happened over time. And so if it does, then we would simply establish the comprehensive plan maximums that are currently missing from the plan for Town Center North. And if it doesn't, then we would be tasked with developing an alternative vision and then identifying the necessary comprehensive plan standards as it relates to density and intensity and the corresponding changes that may be needed for the land development regulations. So again, our role in this whole process, it was really to facilitate the public engagement and tease out the existing challenges and opportunities in Town Center North, the vision from the residents' perspective and the business owners' perspective, and some of those key stakeholders, and then present those findings to you, which is largely what we accomplished at the first workshop, and then we kind of went into a process of some back and forth questions, you'll remember, at our July workshop. So of course, then given that direction from the July workshop and today, then we'll shift into the actual text amendments for the comprehensive plan amendment and the land development regulations, ultimately with the goal of ensuring, of course, a legally viable plan, but also importantly, one that reflects the public opinion and vision. So again, as promised, just a two-part series here of our discussion, the summary recap, and then part two is actually two parts as well. So there's both the short-term and long-term improvement and potential vision that we're going to discuss with you today. So just as a reminder, of course, the study area for Town Center North, the area map that we'll be discussing here is on the screen. And some of these slides, we went through a lot of this at the first workshop, so it's really here in case we need to go back and reference it, right? So this was the original vision that we discussed at the first workshop. The key pieces of this were really that the original vision contemplated the area as being a true economic hub for the city, and that it was really an international destination, right? So that implies some sort of scale and intensity that maybe the residents didn't feel was still appropriate for the Town Center North area. It talks about an 18-hour district, a lot of vertically integrated mixed-use structures, including structured parking, and it just kind of rang of a different intensity than what the public opinion is for this area today. So this was the original vision, and we can come back to this if we need to reference it. Of course, this is the current future land use map. You'll see the overlay area for Town Center North. The issue here being that Town Center North does not currently have maximums as it relates to FAR, floor area ratio, and density in the comprehensive plan. So if someone were to submit a development application today, they would be subject to the underlying land use density and intensities being mixed use business in the medium to high density residential categories, which are the pink and red areas there. And then you'll remember this slide, which really quickly summarized the differences between the different land use and the zonings and the discrepancies or differences between those categories, right? So we talked about the differences between each of the land uses in the zoning as it relates to, again, density, intensity, and height. So that should look familiar. And then the next part that we discussed at the initial workshop was the concept of floor area ratio, what it includes and doesn't include. Importantly, it does not include parking structures, which means that you could potentially have larger structures than maybe initially contemplated. And the second key piece here was that the zoning actually requires 70% of the ground floor of multifamily structures to have a non-residential or retail component on the ground floor. Again, there was a desire from the public for the residential portions of Town Center North kind of stay residential, right? So this is a requirement currently, and we talked about whether you would continue to require that or whether that would simply be an option. And then this chart, again, we'll have this for reference if we need to come back to it, but this summarizes all of the existing conditions for the different developments in Town Center North and shows the over and underbuilt properties and some of their existing conditions for density and FAR as well. So of course, the kind of heartbeat of this project has been the public outreach process. We had a wonderful focus group where we had 3 iterative meetings and built on different concepts and really teased out some really good guiding principles for future redevelopment from them. We really enjoyed working with them and hearing from them. It was a good mix of different stakeholders across the city and different industries. We also had 2 different open houses, an online survey. Different pop-up events. We met with this senior group and did a roundtable with them, which was great. And of course, we had our workshop in the summer of last year. So the public opinion, just as a reminder for the summary, we brought this to you again at our last workshop, but generally the biggest takeaway was don't repeat the east side, right? And the term beachy village came out of a lot of the discussions, right? So there was really a desire for a low-scale, pedestrian-oriented, neighborhood-serving center, as opposed to maybe what the original vision called for, which is really that international destination, right? We heard that a lot of people enjoy the fact that they can do some of their daily shopping there. It meets their daily needs as opposed to something that's so high-end that maybe they go there once or twice a year, right? Of course, there was a desire to see the current commercial plazas redeveloped and enhanced, as well as see an increase in open space and readdress the Collins Avenue treatment something that's a little bit more comfortable for pedestrians, some shade and landscape. Ideally, their preferred condition would result in a reduction of development allowances below what the current zoning regulations allow for, and limit new residential as much as possible in that area. Of course, that all relates to traffic impacts. Our focus group gave us, as I said, some good guiding principles, some of which we highlighted here, which would be keeping the height away from Collins Avenue, prioritizing open space at the ground level, improving the pedestrian experience, establishing new internal streets so that there was a feel of kind of retail streets as opposed to just surface parking that directly abuts Collins, and then to that end also incorporating new structured parking. So these were the questions that we asked you in July. You'll remember the series of questions started with whether the original town center vision still stood, whether it was worthwhile to kind of have a trade-off between density and intensity to see the commercial properties redeveloped, noting that it will probably take some level of density and intensity to entice anyone, to redevelop their property, right? And then we talked about, okay, well, what if those allowances were tied to some public realm features? We talked about whether residential uses should continue to be allowed on those commercial properties. Again, noting that there's probably some requirement for residential in order for them to actually move forward with a redevelopment plan. And then kind of conversely, whether retail should be allowed to expand into the residential areas as a principal use or only on the ground floor. Again, currently it is a requirement for multifamily to have that mixed use. We talked about Collins Ave, and we talked about the inward versus outward facing commercial centers, and we talked about building height. So this, Mayor, I'm gonna go ahead and read the summary that we presented, or that we would like to present to you for feedback. So when I get done with this slide, I'll look to you to have some discussion and tell us whether you think, as a commission, we accurately captured the feedback from the first meeting, or if there's some adjustments to the points that we made here. So, like I said, we're gonna read to you what we think you said to us based on the conversation, but we're gonna pause right after and just let us know if there's some things that you would like to agree to adjust on the slides here. So the first is that the original vision for a fully integrated mixed-use area with a new street grid does not still stand, with the caveat that the new vision is more nuanced, right? So that the original vision in its entirety isn't still applicable, and that you have a different, more nuanced vision for Town Center North. The second concept being that you would prefer to see the scale and separation of commercial and residential areas within Town Center North stay about the same and enhance the aesthetics of the commercial centers. So generally what's there, people are comfortable with, but we note that there's some improvements that could be made, especially as it relates to the appearance and the function of those commercial centers. The next being that we should keep the commercial areas a lower scale with some allowance for mixed use, keeping the height lowest adjacent to Collins Ave. So the height would be kind of pushed back into more of the center of the area, but we recognized that there may be some need, again, for the mixed use features to see the redevelopment of those centers actually take place. That we would prefer to see the RK plazas redeveloped, again, with some limited amount of residential to support, or if not redeveloped, enhance the centers with more parking and a better parking layout, with more pedestrian and outdoor dining areas, better drainage, a better back of house, meaning like all of the service areas, and a safe and buffered walking experience, especially along Collins. So the concept being a redevelopment and no redevelopment scenario, I think that was similar with the public consensus, right? That they would like to see the commercial centers redeveloped to some scale, but if they weren't redeveloped, at least enhance the existing conditions. And then moving towards the bottom of the slide, generally keeping the residential area as it is and keep the commercial vehicle traffic separate while enhancing the pedestrian connections to the commercial areas. So there wasn't a strong desire to create additional street grid networks and allow for more cross connections from a vehicular standpoint, but to really focus on the pedestrian connections from the west into the east side of Town Center North, and to allow but not require retail on the ground floor in the residential area. So with that, Mayor, I'll look to the commission to have some discussion on that summary slide and see if there's any adjustments or if we generally concur with the fact that that was the summary of the July workshop.
Okay. Commissioner Viscar, do you want to start?
Yeah, I still, now I have to look at slides, but there is like this, part of the consensus was that we want the residential to stay the way that it is. But then allowing but not requiring incidental ground floor retail is not the way that it is. So I think that we should respect that. This is the input of the community, and then we're going against it. And I'll remind you that I'm the commissioner who lives there, and I can tell you that even in previous public engagement, being in such a congested area, this is, traffic is always a problem, et cetera, right? I don't need to tell you how jammed we are. That residential area is it's very peaceful. We have a wide road, and it's like a breather away from the hectic aspects around us. And so I would really like to see that preserved. I mentioned at the last meeting that, this idea of, because you want the residential to have access to the commercial, and that's the idea with the mixed use. This particular area, a lot of the residential has access to the commercial via the back way. Mm-hmm. So we're not missing it. In fact, when we have tried to implement it, I can speak for my complex, there's always, we don't have it for a reason, right? There's always been little conflicts around that. So if the public is telling you they don't want it, I would leave it out. That would be my suggestion.
Thank you.
Okay. And for the purposes of this discussion, I just would like to get clarification, because I know that there's been some confusion, what is there versus what is allowed to be there. So can you please clarify that? Because many residents say keep it as is, but as is not necessarily what it can be, based
Sure.
on what we have right now in our ordinances, in our code rather.
Sure, there's certainly several underdeveloped properties, largely being the RK centers, right there. If they were to redevelop under the current allowances, they'd be able to build out to much greater than a 2-story retail-only shopping center, as well as some of the smaller scale residential properties like the Salem House and Avila South. Those would certainly, even Beach Place, those would be able to build to a much greater intensity and density than they are today. Conversely, there's some properties that are over the development allowances, right? Just given the discrepancies between the comprehensive plan and the zoning regulations. But currently, when you say keep it as is, I think people are generally referring to the 2-story environment, but it is correct to note that the current regulations would be much greater than what the current conditions reflect.
And the commercial requirement, that is, you said 70%, I believe?
So for a multifamily structure, the town center north zoning district would require that the ground floor has at least 70%
right now
of a non-residential use being retail or commercial.
So if, to Commissioner Viscar's point, if we were to change that based on what is built there, we would have to change that code.
That would be certainly a piece that I think, yes, you would look at amending to eliminate that or even prohibit it, depending on how far you wanted to go.
Okay, great, thank you. Vice Mayor, do you want to go next?
May I just interject for a moment?
Go ahead.
When I say leave it the residential without the commercial, I mean the existing residential. If we're going to be developing a mixed use where, let's say, RK redevelops and they want to make it mixed use, I don't object to that. I'm just objecting to inserting commercial where there currently isn't any.
Yes, understood.
Okay. All right.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, so in regards to what we're talking about, mixing residential with commercial, I think that we need to keep in mind that we are a very narrow city. We only have one street traversing through there. So probably that will change. We'll make more inside internal streets. But my concern is that we're gonna be taking the traffic from Collins and, passing it on to, or adding it to the back, where right now it is peaceful. And I think that the sentiment of the residents is that they wanna keep it cozy, they wanna keep it like neighborly. So I think that needs to be paramount. And when it comes to development, we need to be mindful of the density and intensity. I understand that there are economic, let's say, questions. Let's say somebody comes and redevelops, for instance, arcade plazas, right? The density is probably not gonna stay the same. It's not gonna be 2 stories. So we had talked a few years ago, more than a few years ago, about perhaps arcade going 4 stories. But I think the main point is that it needs to be kept where it's not suffocating. Because what's transpired on the east of Collins and what we have right now in the city, it feels overwhelming, to be honest with you. And I think that we need to be very careful not to, pass that on or to make that same, let's say, development on the other side. And we definitely need to keep the commercial and the residential separated because we are a narrow city. We don't have the geography of like a Doral or some other cities where they can have those internal streets. Imagine we have commercial, right on North Bay Road, and we have traffic jams. I mean, we already have a traffic jam with one of the residential buildings where the entrance is kind of awkward and you have a lot of backup there. I can't imagine putting some commercial there and then having it become worse. So that's my idea. I think what like the city of Doral has done and some other cities with their downtowns, I think it's perfect. You have streets that make it very easy for pedestrians and for cars to kind of go in and out, and the shops themselves look very appealing. And then on the back, I don't know if those buildings, I'm thinking specific of Doral and Dania Point. I think some of those buildings that are residential have commercial, but it's like, it's done correctly. We don't have that space, but I think we could look into something like that without the commercial that the residential buildings, yeah. Now, my question is, we're sitting here talking, have we had conversations with some of these stakeholders? I mean, you have Plaza of the Americas, you have a lot of buildings, and I know that this is kind of laying the groundwork, or let's say the template, so when those buildings redevelop, it happens in a certain way. But my question is, have we had conversations with some of the stakeholders?
Yeah, so we had a pretty robust public engagement process that largely occurred in the spring and summer of last year. And so we definitely had representatives in our focus group from Town Center North, Town Center South, and then we purposely picked people that kind of represented the full spectrum of the city, north to south. And then everyone was welcome to, of course, participate in the open houses and the online surveys as well. And we were able to parse out Town Center North survey responses versus the overall city, so that we could see if the residents within Town Center North felt differently than the overall city. Mm-hmm. Generally, they actually were pretty consistent. There wasn't a major discrepancy, but we've definitely been engaged with the different residential communities as well as the commercial stakeholders as well.
Okay, all right. What has been the feedback from the commercial stakeholders?
So far, of course, they haven't expressed a large desire to redevelop anytime in the near future, because the economy, of course, is doing pretty well, staying pretty stable, right? So they're very leased up. All of their spaces are pretty much occupied. So there's not a large desire to undergo the lengthy construction process at this point. Usually that's going to happen probably more in your economic downturns where you're not having as much success leasing those spaces. You might look at different opportunities. But right now, I think they're pretty happy staying status quo and doing what they're doing since they're having pretty good luck leasing right now.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Joseph?
Yes. Okay, so right now, as far as I see it, the Katz family are the champions of our city as far as with their malls and the arcade plazas. And I'm hoping that they have a plan to keep them as is or slightly restructure them, but with the idea of having them be similar to what they are now. Without that, let's say if arcade plazas were in the hands of another developer, I think this city would quickly be like New York City, unfortunately. So I look at the arcade plazas now as they are, as suiting the city perfectly, that they are what the residents want. More or less, like someone said, they could, look into repairing the drainage issues, maybe working on having different dining formats. But other than that, as far as the height of the structures and the plazas themselves, they suit our city for what should be desired for many years to come. I know on the north end of the city, I know we're not talking about that today, but we have issues that I'm concerned with the commercial marina that's proposed that we need to fight off. The property behind Publix, right next to our school, there's an intent to tremendously increase our traffic there. So, but that's another discussion. But right now, I think having non-commercial in the interior streets of this area is exactly what the residents want, and I believe we should move forward and, with a status quo. Now, what I wanted to ask you, do you know of any properties that are in jeopardy of being bought out?
In the Town Center North
Yes.
area? I'm not sure if staff would
Stan?
be prepared to answer that question.
That we have to
excuse
be
me.
concerned with?
Go ahead, Mr. City Manager.
I'm not aware of anything right now.
Okay, so, yeah, so if what I would like to see, if there is a property bought out, that the density and intensity should remain the same.
As what's currently built?
As what's currently built, correct. Just replacement structure.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stevenson, you're up.
Okay, there is an area that is being empty for over 2 years now, which is the Epicure kind of plaza or square area, whatever. So it's not being rented successfully like the arcade plazas. Any thoughts about that specific piece of property, because it's not as successful as the other ones? So there is a big potential that something's coming in the near future about that. Have you had a conversation with these developers?
Yes, we've talked with the different property owners. Of course, it's very underdeveloped as compared to what they could potentially do. Obviously each individual developer has its own timeline and interests and different portfolio where they might be focusing in different areas, but I would anticipate at some point in the shorter term future that you might see redevelopment plans, just because it is such a ripe for redevelopment property, largely being that a large portion in the rear doesn't even have a structure on it, right? And then you have a very small single-story structure up against Collins Avenue.
So with the rules as they are right now, what is the potential development there as of right now?
So if you were to submit a plan today, that would be under the mixed-use business land use, and that has a base density of 25 units per acre, up to 85 units an acre with bonuses, and an intensity of a 2.0 FAR. So that's largely for your non-residential pieces, which means 2.0 floor area ratio. And there's no height measurements in the comprehensive plan, but there are a wide variety of different height allowances throughout Town Center North in the Town Center North zoning district.
But not height.
For height, yes, there's different street types there. So along Collins, there's generally a 50-foot height allowance for the first 130 feet, and then it gets higher as you go further back into the center and into the center of Town Center North. So it just depends on exactly where you are on the property, but it does get to be a pretty substantial height allowance.
Okay. That's my question.
Okay. You can continue.
May I ask for a just
Sure, go ahead.
because I'm having trouble with, I'm sure your answer is correct. I'm just having trouble putting it together in terms of with all the numbers. Okay, so simple question. Back to the Epicure piece of land. And I understand, right, that's why you have the buildings that look like cash registers, like this and like this. So could we have a 30-story building there?
So it depends on where you are in the site, right? Because you do have height regulations
In the highest place in the back of the property, could you have a 20-story structure there?
You could have up to,
The maximum is 190 feet for the district. And on that street in particular where Epicure is located, the max would be 140 feet. So about 14 to 15 stories, depending how you design it.
That helps me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But part of the problem is this very complicated street network map. That's why every single property is different in the Town Center North in terms of height. So it's a very cumbersome code how it's currently drafted.
But that's why the answers are cumbersome. It's not your fault. I'm
Yeah.
sure what you're saying is correct. But how do we explain that, right? So long story, the super simplified answer to Commissioner Stuyvesant's question is you can have a 15-story building there.
Yes.
In the back and,
yeah,
like this.
it'll
Okay,
cash
yes,
register, like
okay.
you said, up
Got
to
it.
about that height
And
probably.
also like a cruise ship. Imagine a cruise. Yeah, exactly. Okay.
But I believe we're looking to do away with the birthday cake, aren't we? We discussed that?
Same thing.
Okay.
Well, I don't know, I think that it was alluded to because they're talking about, they're talking about putting, the lower buildings along Collins and then gradually increasing.
Yeah, so I know we had discussed something about maybe 500 feet off Collins to make some type of restriction regarding the distance off Collins, that we would not allow a high-rise.
Like a setback, yeah.
Continue with the,
Mayor, did you have any comments?
no,
specific-
I want to keep you going, and then I'll have my questions probably towards the end.
Okay. All right. So that was our first stopping point. We just wanted to get some feedback on, again, our summary of your feedback to us to make sure that we accurately captured your initial direction.
Actually, I am going to stop you for a moment because I think that this is back to a question that was brought up. Do you have any data as far as what percentage of the, I guess, focus groups and survey takers and conversations that you had were the business owners versus the property owners, the visitors and residents?
Yes, we were able to separate out the survey into...
Not just the survey, every conversation. I know that you met with the property owners separately.
Yeah, so we have the focus group. Obviously, we have all of that information because we had about 12 to 15 people in the focus groups, and we know exactly who those folks were. And they were a wide range of residents, business owners, people that lived, the full range north to south throughout the city. So we intentionally selected a pretty diverse group. From the open houses, we do have sign-in sheets, so we have kind of their contact information to understand who came to the open houses, and then the surveys, we also have some of that type of data as well.
But did you keep any record of overlapping? We tend to have the same people come to the meetings.
Yeah, we did see a lot of similar faces between the open houses and the focus groups, and people that listened in the focus groups just as a kind of outside listener. So we did get to see some similar faces, but we also saw different groups throughout the process as well. So it was nice to see some repeat faces, to see the investment in the process and the project.
That's great. Okay, go ahead, please.
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Or clarification. Who chose the focus group?
There was some feedback from the commission in terms of the focus group selection, and then we moved forward with that group as well.
Same. I
had
had
no input.
zero input on who were the folks in the focus group. Actually, that was a conversation, and I specifically make that comment before that we should be the ones selecting or at least proposing the people who was going to be part of the focus group. And I cannot talk on behalf of everybody else, but I was completely keeping out of it. So I don't know how.
Amy?
I know that people could sign up to be a volunteer, I believe. However, who decided who were going to be that focus group? And I can talk on behalf of myself. I had no input into it.
Can you just remind everyone how the group was selected?
Sure. So we opened up an application online for anyone that was interested to volunteer on the focus group. Of that, I forget how many applicants we had exactly, but it was about 20 to 25. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah.
And then from there, we made suggestions to the commission in a memo as to who to serve on the focus group and who to be alternate focus group members.
When was
And
that?
so that was sent through the city manager's office. There was an email and a memo to the commission.
Did not see that.
Yes, we did have it. It was quite a while ago, so you probably don't remember. Okay,
I don't miss too many things.
please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go ahead into moving into the next portion of the discussion. Of course, a lot of the discussion that we're having today is setting us up for actually writing and establishing the vision document, which again is going to be the foundation for those comprehensive plan and land development regulation amendments. It's largely going to be a graphic-based document with different combinations of imagery and diagrams, and focused on the public realm features, meaning the streets, the open spaces, massing, some setbacks, and then hardscape and landscape features. And then that will really set the foundation to come in with the more text-based component, which would be, again, the comprehensive plan and the land development regulations.
Just
One second, Commissioner Joseph, let her finish. We're going to go in order. Go ahead.
So
You could just write it down.
just as a final slide here before we move into the next section, to give you an idea of the timing and the process. Of course, here today we're talking about the vision document. This is our Town Center North workshop for that vision document. And then the next steps through the spring and summer would be to draft the vision document and bring that back to you for approval by resolution. And then we can move into the comprehensive plan and LDR text amendments to implement the vision document. So did you have a question before we move into the
Yes.
next section?
Thank you. So earlier you mentioned bonuses. Now, bonuses are not a given, correct?
Correct.
Yes. But you made it seem as though you were speaking regarding reconstruction, let's say, of Epicure. So bonuses are not a guarantee.
That's correct.
Okay, I wanted to clarify that. Also, when you were speaking to these focus groups, was anyone not concerned about additional traffic?
No, traffic, of course, was a very big component. That's
And-
the desire to keep the scale smaller.
Okay, and was anyone interested in seeing another building like Aurora on Collins?
I think the overall consensus from the focus group was to keep the height away from Collins. So if there's necessary building height, that it would be concentrated more towards the center, towards the west side of Town Center North, but to keep the scale along Collins specifically smaller scale.
Right, so basically Aurora was a tremendous error that we don't want to repeat. Was that basically what you heard from people?
I don't know that we specifically spoke about Aurora, but generally the consensus was to keep the height lower scale along Collins.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move into the next section of our workshop and presentation. So just as a reminder, this is going to be split into two parts, and that'll constitute the remainder of our time with you today. So the first portion that we're going to focus on is kind of the shorter term redevelopment opportunities that are presented in Town Center North that are largely based on the public input that we heard through the public engagement sessions as it relates to the existing conditions with the commercial plazas specifically. And obviously our primary goal is to establish the long-term vision plan through the vision documents. That's your 20, 30, 40-year vision document. But we also need to recognize the reality that the redevelopment to the scale that we're talking about, which is really knock down, tear down redevelopment, might not happen in the short term because of some unique circumstances in Town Center North, being the mix of under and overdeveloped properties as well as the ownership patterns, right? Of course, there's the RK commercial plazas that constitute a large portion of Town Center North, and like I mentioned earlier, we haven't heard that there's a large desire from their team to redevelop in the near term. But there are some significant concerns from the public with some of the existing conditions found in those centers. Also, the fact that there's a large number of condo properties, meaning you have a lot of individual property owners that would need to be, the properties would need to be aggregated and then sold and then redeveloped, right? So that creates some total redevelopment challenges. And then you do have newer residential towers that are, you know, less likely to redevelop because they're newer. So the first piece that we're going to talk about is the shorter term redevelopment potential, especially as it relates to, again, the RK centers. And it all starts with getting excited about solving a parking problem. So this is a key opportunity that kind of opens the door for other improvements within the RK centers and really snowballs into the shorter term redevelopment potential, and even, you know, just improving the conditions if they did kind of generally remain the same for the next 10, 20 years. There's a lot that can be done without tearing the centers down and rebuilding. So the first key thing to focus and hone in on is parking and circulation, which was one of the main concerns from the residents when they go to these centers. It's really hard to park. There's not enough parking. They're getting towed. So there's a lot of opportunity with the surface lots to address enhanced parking and revised circulation patterns, right? So when you look at the centers, and I'll show you on a slide coming up here, there's largely two main surface lots that serve the RK centers, the north and the south centers. And again, it's very tight to get in. It's hard to find spaces. And then we obviously have a lot of the public residents that are parking there, using it for beach parking and getting towed. The surface area of the surface lots constitutes a large portion of these parcels that could be better served for some other purpose. You know, we heard a lot about improved open spaces and outdoor dining and things like that that could dovetail off of better utilizing that surface parking area through parking structures and the like. So by solving the parking problem, which we're going to get into, we can also address things that were also mentioned by the public, being the aesthetics of the centers, creating that pedestrian environment, providing for more and better outdoor dining experiences, adding some landscape, and addressing the drainage. So again, by addressing these short-term issues, you're setting yourself up to really set the stage for long-term redevelopment potential, simply by starting with addressing the parking. Right.
But let me ask you, this is
Commissioner
private
Joseph.
property,
Commissioner Joseph,
so.
Commissioner Joseph, let's do this orderly. Let her finish and then we'll
Yeah,
go in
but it's
order.
private property
Yes,
that we're
yes.
discussing,
Understood, and
so
we're
what is the reason?
working into this exactly, right? So we're going to get to that in just a second, Commissioner. So again, the existing conditions are shown on the map here. This is one of the more recent plans that show, again, the two surface lots. There were previous parking variances granted that, again, contribute to some of the existing challenges and parking shortages that are out there, creating some of the visitor frustration when they go to the centers and they can't find spaces. Folks are getting towed again. And it also, from the RK Center, does limit the types of tenants and the tenant mix that they can have, because they have to work within the confines of the limited number of parking spaces that are there. You can't have all high generating parking demand uses like the restaurants and things like that. You have to also have a mix of some lower generating uses that don't contribute to your parking requirements as much, which maybe isn't as favorable for the types of things that they might want. They might be missing out on some tenants because they simply don't have the parking in the existing centers. So what does that mean for the city? There's an opportunity to partner with the RK team on parking solutions, right? And what we mean by that is partnering on structured parking. There's a large amount of land that could easily accommodate a structured garage, and again, that opens up land to accommodate other features that are highly desired, again, by the residents' input, the landscaping, the plaza spaces, the outdoor dining, create some additional infill at the same scale that would create the interior streets. So when we're talking about the benefits for the property owner and the city moving into some sort of partnership on this parking solution, of course, the property owner, there's a whole host of potential benefits, whether that's, again, freeing up land with the surface parking by creating a structured garage. It gives them greater flexibility in their tenant mix, and they could also generate some revenue with a pay-for parking structure. And also, if you overbuild the garage, you're setting yourself up for future redevelopment by not having to build maybe another garage or another garage as large. If you provide some extra spaces in an initial garage, and of course, just a better customer environment and less frustration when people are coming to your centers. From the city's side, of course, we'd be potentially obtaining dedicated city spaces for beach parking and other uses. We could look at potentially integrating a rooftop park, which would contribute to your park's level of service potentially. You could potentially even integrate some additional facility space into the garage, depending on how it was designed. This is just like an initial list, right? There's a lot of different ways that you can approach some sort of parking partnership and solution here, especially as it relates to the design of the parking and the agreements that are entered into as to how the city gets to benefit from that garage. The residents, of course, it would be easier to park and have access to the stores and shops. They would be less towing because there's the available parking spaces for them to utilize, and it would allow for the centers to be beautified by, again, taking advantage of the space that was once taken up by the surface lots and doing something else with that that's a little bit higher and better use of the property. So what does that mean in terms of how you partner? There's, of course, monetary contributions. There's the bonus funds that have been contributed from other projects. You could consider reduction in permit fees or some alternative parking rates for future uses going into redevelopment scenarios in the future. And so what does that mean? Of course, there's the parking in the rear. This is dimensionally very capable of fitting a garage in the rear there in that location in the red dash. And then in the pink, you could start to look at infilling and creating additional 1 and 2 story commercial buildings that create these internal streets and adding some additional plaza space. And so when we look at the north center, this is the existing condition where you have the L-shaped building and then the out parcel with surface parking. You could start to take some of that surface parking up against the existing outdoor dining areas or sidewalk areas, and you could use that space for expanded patios, You could add an additional building along 170th potentially. Of course, again, to the commissioner's point, this is all private property, right? But it just shows you what you can do when you start to address the parking issue. You can start to create some opportunities for some better designed centers that speak to some of the residents' concerns, where they're looking for more space as it relates to hardscape and landscaped areas. You could even add another little parklet there along Collins Avenue. Same on the south, where you kind of have the curved building. Right now, you largely have a large surface lot that directly abuts Collins and one out parcel there, or one out building. You could start to infill and create an additional plaza area with this 1 or 2 story structure and significant landscape and features like water fountains and things like that. But significantly, you're taking rows of parking and expanding the patio space for some more pedestrian amenities. So what does that look like? There's a lot of different opportunities. Again, it is private property, and so, to a large scale, this is going to be driven by the property owners. But just to kind of help you get excited about solving a parking problem, right? This is the opportunities that you can create when you start to take surface parking and you put it in a structured garage, and then you can use these spaces for better environments within the centers. And so these are the types of imagery that capture kind of what the focus groups and the public outreach was really driving in terms of a redevelopment vision scenario, right? So a lot of plaza space, places to sit, places to hang out, green spaces. You could have a second story terraced area with outdoor dining, a lot more space to integrate landscaping. And so you just open up the opportunities on that property by addressing the parking problem, while also ensuring that the city gets some benefits out of it in terms of the additional spaces and some other incentives that you could continue to work on. And this is the South Plaza here, so same type of thing, just by structuring the parking to the north. I think with this center, just given the location of the parking structure, you'd want to probably maintain a lot of the surface parking here because it's not as close, but there's still opportunities to expand some of the patio space there by having a parking garage that serves the northern centers. Some of these areas could use valet and use that garage. And then you have opportunities for much more comfortable and enjoyable spaces as a visitor. Of course, the parking garage itself, there's a lot of different design opportunities. You've seen probably some really neat parking garages as you drive around and visit different places. There's all sorts of different design options for parking garages now. The idea being that you're going to focus on screening it from the residential area to the west, but there's all sorts of design techniques for the parking garage design, right? And then the rooftop, like I said, you could activate the rooftop and create some more park space and some green space. Again, that was what we heard as one of the major desires out of the public engagement process. All right, so all by starting to address the parking and circulation concerns by providing for structured partnering and engaging in some sort of incentive with RK team to build the structured garage, then you snowball into addressing these other issues that were the main takeaways from the public concerns with the existing conditions being the aesthetics, the pedestrian environment, outdoor dining, the landscaping, and the drainage issues. So at this point, Mayor, I'd like to pause and ask you for some direction on this issue, and the request would be for direction to authorize the city manager and staff to further analyze potential parking solutions and partnerships and potential incentive opportunities, and then bring those alternatives back to the commission for presentation and further discussion.
Okay, before I open it back up, the floor to the commission, I have a question regarding the number of parking spaces. How many are there now?
You have about 1,000 or so between the north and the south. I think there was some restriping that occurred.
And so when your suggestion as far as a parking garage in the back of, or really adjacent to Milam's, that would be one parking garage to service both plazas?
So the parking garage idea would largely be for the north
Okay.
plaza, so the L shape and then the
Got it.
half circle. And then I think the one to the south, you'd probably keep a lot of the surface lot just because it's a little further away from that garage. But
Okay.
it could serve some of the parking needs there.
And what is the allowable height right now? If let's just say the Katz Plaza decided they wanted to go ahead and move ahead with this.
It goes back to the very tricky height diagram. Amy, I don't know. if
Right,
you
no, I
have,
know. You don't have to answer it this
yeah.
moment, but I guess that would be part of your, analyzing as far as working back with staff. Okay, I'm gonna open
Yeah,
it back up.
it does get pretty substantial
Got it.
back in that
All right,
area.
Commissioner Joseph, would you like to ask questions?
Amy, do we know, on the Aquilina parking garage, how many spaces are in that garage? Any idea?
It was just north of 450 spaces, so I want to say
Whoa.
460, 480.
Okay, so is that a number, I'm asking, is that a number that you were considering would be helpful?
I think that you want to really take the next step and get into that. I don't think it'd be appropriate for us to provide a specific number, but I think you'd
Right.
want to look at taking a significant amount of the surface parking in the north center and structuring that, and that frees up the space to do some of these other improvements. I think, like we showed, you want to probably leave some of what we call convenience parking spaces, so that you can do kind of the 5-minute run in and grab your lunch and run out without having to go into the garage, but it'd be a much reduced number. So I think in the north, you have about 600 spaces, and you have about another 400 in the south, based on the plans that we saw. So I think you'd want to look at
Right.
structuring a large number of the 600.
So the Aquilina is what, how many stories? The garage? 8 stories? And 460 spots?
Yes.
And then we were talking about maybe not having the garage be all parking, maybe having one floor internal, workout or something, or,
Yeah, I mean, there's a endless potential, right, on that
Right.
design because it's kind of raw land in the back. The difference being that I'm not sure dimensionally how large the other property you're talking about is, where they had the 450 spaces.
we
but-
have the lady here to answer.
Yeah. In the rear, currently in that area behind the kind of half circle building, you have just over 200 spaces just on the surface level. So obviously the design of the parking garage and accounting for some setbacks, if you just kind of use that as your base per level of how many parking spaces, if you kind of built out that whole pad as a parking garage per level, you might get a pretty good amount of parking spaces and be able to keep the height lower just because you have a pretty large pad to work with in terms of each individual floor area. Whereas if it's on a tighter site, obviously you have to go higher to get the same number of spaces. So that's one benefit of this site, is that it's a pretty large area in the rear of the buildings.
So to me, the garage with the, working together with RK and the city, sounds like something that might be a very reasonable option.
Commissioner Stuyvesant? Nothing? Commissioner Viscara?
So, 2 things. I don't think the city has properly handled development and parking needs, and that's why we have certain problems now. So you can't go wrong with additional parking. I feel parking is always good, whether it's for visitors or people always asking us, can I park my extra vehicle? The condos don't have room. So there's parking is always good. So I think, and that's something that I noticed in my visit to a couple of locations, that they seem to be organized around parking. Like they figured it out. They figured out something that we didn't, right? That, and it made a lot of sense, like as a visitor going in and having available parking, et cetera. I think that's good. So I also liked your, I think you captured what residents would like to see, the lower, this looks like it's a 2, maybe 3 stories of commercial. It's beautiful, but obviously you need to park somewhere, and that would be in the back. So I would bring to your attention, and I don't remember the details, but I know that we looked at something about a garage. It was gonna be close to Plaza of the Americas. We talked about possible city spaces, and there was something, and it's before I was elected, so sometime before 2018, I can't give you an exact year, and it fell apart. I don't remember why, but there were issues around that. So I would advise you to look into what happened, because I don't recall why it fell apart, but it did. Obviously, it's not there.
Great.
Yes.
Was that a city project or part of a private development project?
I don't remember the details. I do know that it failed.
Do you remember?
It was a recommendation that was put together that looked really nice, I remember, and that included all of these elements. But I think it was more of a recommendation.
I remember there was something specifically wrong that the city manager from Plaza of the Americas caught, and that's why it fell apart. But I don't remember what it was.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah, that's good information.
Let her finish. Are you done, Commissioner? Okay, Vice Mayor, go ahead.
Yeah. So first, I'd like to understand the context of going into a partnership or giving, RK some incentives to building the parking lot. Would this be a first step to more steps where RK commits to redeveloping his retail spaces?
I think there's a lot of opportunities here, right? So this is kind of setting the stage to take a further look at
Okay.
what all the city could get out of the partnership deal, whether that's a certain number of beach parking spaces or other facility space in the garage. But there's a lot of different ways to kind of structure a potential partnership, to your point, requiring some other commitment in terms of improvements that they're going to make in the area that's freed up by removing the surface parking and relocating it to the garage.
Okay. Yeah, because if we're gonna be involved in that with RK, obviously, we would like to see, the modeling that you showed us for what, the residents would like to see there. It's excellent. So I think, the whole city wants to see something like that. Obviously, it entails a lot of capital expenditure from RK, and I'm wondering if there could be some guarantees from the property owner, if we're gonna get into a partnership and incentives, et cetera. I don't know if the city's gonna have to spend some money on that, but definitely it needs to be a partnership where we see it come to full fruition and have a commitment from the property owner. And what else? And I think that's what I'd like to understand. I think it's great. We need more parking going into those shopping centers, those shopping strip malls, if you want to call them, is very difficult. And we definitely need an improvement on that. But yeah, if this could be the first step and we could get some guarantees and commitments from RK and whoever else is involved, we're all for it. Yeah, I'm for it.
Thank you. So some of the things that I think need to be considered, first question. In discussions with the property owner, were they open to a parking garage? Did you have that discussion yet with them or no?
We very conceptually talked about a parking garage at some point, but we didn't go into too much detail because at that point, and this was a while back, I think they were maybe in a different thought process about redevelopment in the centers, and that may have changed more so.
Okay.
Kind of in the last recent couple weeks or months. But I think that this opportunity is something that solving a parking problem is something that any property owner, especially a commercial property owner, is going to probably be interested in.
Okay, and then, go ahead.
I just wanted to, if I can interject and kind of summarize. Right now, I think we're dealing with two different issues. One, what we're looking at is kind of the overall vision from you going forward that we can incorporate into our zoning. So yes, RK is the property owner that we're dealing with, but it wouldn't be specifically, a separate issue would be some sort of public-private partnership with RK. So we wouldn't get into that specific regarding this meeting. This meeting is, I think the overarching concept has been parking is one of the main concerns. That's a feedback that we've had. So what we've talked about internally would be going forward, if it's the commission's directive that we in some way incentivize the zoning as we rework this plan, that would encourage whomever the property owner is to invest in and develop a garage, that would be the approach. In my discussions with the city attorney, we also have to be careful that we cannot use public funds in a private partnership. Doesn't mean that we can't. Do you want to clarify?
Well, you can, but to your point, there are two issues here. One, we're dealing with some zoning changes that are prospective. You're looking 20, 30, 40 years down the line. So there's a visioning aspect of it that is important, regardless of who owns the property. With regards to changes or more immediate changes or solutions with this particular property owner, we have to be careful because it would have to be some sort of public-private partnership, probably statutory, and you do have limitations. Although money can be used, there's ownership issues because it is private property. So it's complex, it's doable, but it's complex as to what you can or cannot do with regards to that. So it's not just a matter of going to RK and saying, hey, are you interested? And let's just have some guarantees. It's not just a simple agreement. There is a process you have to go through. But it's certainly doable, but it really is all up to the private property owner to be willing to do that.
Right, no, I understand. I think that, I think we all understand that it's not going to be something that's going to be easy. My question was, I don't want to give them direction if it's a pie in the sky kind of thing. So that's what I wanted to get clarification on is, as long as you hear that we all are in agreement that parking is important. And before, Mr. City Manager, 1 second, I know you want to say something. Currently, the parking spaces that they have, if they were to redevelop, assuming there's no garage, are they now in compliance with the amount of parking spaces they have, Amy? I know you may not be ready for this question, so that could be something for later.
The last time they received a parking variance was in 1998, and every time we receive a business license application, we have to analyze the parking to make sure that they're still within the variance that was provided in 1998. So they're still deficient in parking per the code standards.
They are deficient,
Yes.
Okay. So if they were to redevelop, let's just say they knock the whole thing down and we're going to make all new stores and restaurants, they would still need to, regardless if they got a garage or not a garage, they would still need to have more parking.
It depends on how they're redeveloping and what the program
Well, okay,
is,
let me change
they would
the
need
way
to
I'm
meet the
asking the
code.
question. Based on what they have now, how many parking spaces are they short? That's the
I-
question. I know, that
I
not
don't
right
have
now.
it
If you can get back
right
to us on that, I would, that's just something I would be interested in knowing.
Okay.
Mr. City Manager, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say going forward, so what we need to know is, and I think we have consensus, but I'll wait to hear the rest of your discussion from the commission. What incentives would you like for us to incorporate in this zoning so that any of the property owners in this town center district would be interested in accessing for maximum use of their property? Because if we don't have that, then that seems to be the main concern.
I think we would probably want you to come back to us with different options as far as what incentives are best practices, what's even allowed by law.
Right, so,
Yeah, we would have to, I mean, I don't know to what extent they want some general direction, but again, on the two fronts, one with regards to prospective changes to your code that would potentially incentivize future landowners or current landowners. Certainly, it's something, you know, we probably should come back to you with regards to what's possible,
Right.
what's as best practice, and so on and so forth. And with regards to any potential opportunities with the current property owner, we'd have to decide sort of what direction we wanted to take as a city, because the requests, there's some formality to the request. So if we are truly looking at a P3, there are formalities, excuse me, as to how we would actually request that and put that together. So we'd have to decide that as well.
Okay.
so I think what we're looking for today is the commission's vision that we can direct Jeff and Caitlin to go back in and put some sort of document together that we can bring back to you that incorporates what you're telling us today. So the different things that you've mentioned, you know, the various height challenges and the parking, we know parking is one of the #1 issues that we want to bring back to you.
Okay. Does anyone have anything else to add? Commissioner Viscara?
Well, in terms of, well, I don't want to go into the incentives, but I think there's multiple things that we need to address, but I'll wait until we have recommendations, right? But certainly parking is one of them. And the, I guess like I would want uniformity across just uniformity, and then not have the different requirements. We know when we ask a question, we shouldn't have different requirements at this corner than at that corner, right? So I think that would simplify life going forward also.
Vice Mayor, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to see what incentives, you know, you come back with. And also, I would like to see uniformity and be mindful of, you know, we're talking about parking structures, you know, be mindful of how big those parking structures are as well. I think we all, once this parking structure for Aquilina was built, I think it was a little bit of a shock to all of us. You know, even though it's, you know, eight stories, whatever it is, you know, we need to be mindful that it's done correctly, so it does not feel like you have like a huge Lego piece there and it's overwhelming. Okay, yeah.
Commissioner Stuyvesant?
Yeah, and so my only question is, to get these opportunities or alternative, we need to continue spending in consultants. Do we have that budget for? And until when we're gonna be with this?
Yes, we have it budgeted, and this, as we explained when we started, this is a very significant investment. We're trying to change our zoning code from all of the challenges that we've had over the past 25 years. And procedurally and legally, it's necessary for us to go through this process, because at the end of the day, we are affecting our property owners' property rights. So this is one of the many steps that we need to go through. And we have another workshop scheduled for Friday in order to clarify and get clear direction from you how to go forward in the future. So yes, it is absolutely necessary, and it's also necessary that we have experts on board should there ever be a challenge that can support the changes that you want to make.
So my question again is, because we wanna change or because we wanna be in compliance? Because we have issues right now with our comp plan and whatever. So this is specific is because we are trying to get a magic solution for parking, or is because we are not in compliance? Because I think we are mixing two things.
There's really almost 3 issues here.
Okay.
So you are dealing with a compliance issue on the east side. Okay, so we're rectifying issues with your comp plan and your code with regards to the east side. On the west side, you're looking at changing your code to effectuate the commission's vision to make any changes you deem prudent with regards to future development. Heard a lot about height, intensity and density and those types of things. So those are things you're looking at. The parking situation certainly is something you want to look at, but I think you need to separate that. That's something separate that may be workable with current property owners and so on and so forth. But I think, and Amy can correct me, but the crux of what we're trying to do, because you are in a zoning in progress that's been around for some time now. So we're getting close to the finish line. They can't last forever. So to the extent you want to make changes to your code to effectuate some changes to development on the west side, we need to kind of square that away as to what those changes may or may not be, so we can actually codify those and get those going, and then we can look at parking as a future solution, through the avenues that have been discussed.
I still, need clarification, okay? So again, do we need to make these changes because we are not incorrect? We need to, or we want to, because twice you guys said we want to make changes. So that's what I want to be very specific, that we have to make this code changes because we have to, or we want to because we see the issue with the parking, because it's two different things. And because our vision, because remember, we are all here temporary.
Right.
So the vision of this commission today might be very different of the vision of the commission tomorrow, or that it was yesterday. So my point is that we are making changes because we want to make our vision in perpetuate for the future, or because we have to make the change. That's what I want to have the clarification, because if we are doing this because we want to, that is totally different, okay? Or if we are doing this because we have to, it's different as well. So that's the part, because there is a lot of alliances going on, especially with politicians behind the scenes, and I just want to make sure that we are not doing this just to pay back to the people that was banking certain politicians. So that's what I want to have very, very, very clear, that we have to make this code changes because we are not complying with the law, and not because we want to, again, put in perpetuity whatever it is that we have the vision of right now, and keep it and make it part of our code.
So I apologize, I didn't answer your question the first time. On the east side, you have to, okay, because your buildings are out of compliance with regards to the comp plan, so you need to rectify that and make them compliant. On the west side, it's if you want to. You don't have to change anything if you don't want to, but if you're concerned about height and you're concerned about intensity and density, the way that it's currently framed in your code and what's permitted and not permitted, Epicure is an example, those types of things, and those are things that you may want to change, but you don't necessarily have to.
So on the west side, it's to prevent.
Well, on the west side, it's to basically, again, you're the stewards of development, essentially, and your code. So if you want to make changes, this is the time to do it, based on the feedback we've gotten through the entire process, plus what you envision the west side to look like. On the east side, to your question, Commissioner, we have to do that. The east is definitely something we have to do. On the west, it's sort of a vision that you may or may not have.
Amy, go ahead.
Thank you. So in the town center area, this was town center south and town center north, there is a discrepancy between the comprehensive plan and the zoning code. The comprehensive plan restricts development, whereas the zoning code allows greater development. And with that inconsistency, redevelopment is not being catalyzed right now. That's why there isn't redevelopment occurring. Because if we were to get a site plan, they would be restricted to what's in the comprehensive plan. So that's why we're going through this exercise, because you can't fix the regulations without a vision. So we're here to make sure we understand the commission's vision, the residents and the property owners, tie that together in a vision document, and then come back with the comp plan policy and code amendments to support it. So that's why we're here today.
Okay.
And I do believe it is necessary, because the property owners can't move forward with redevelopment at this time.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
So for me, I'm interested in uniformity, as Commissioner Viscara mentioned. And also, I have a question regarding this birthday cake idea of construction. Is that memorialized, or is that something we can change readily?
So it is currently codified. It's in your land development regulations in terms of different street treatments and locations and the heights that are allowed along those different streets.
Right.
But it's certainly something that we would look at and potentially amend given your direction.
Yes, so that's something for me that I would absolutely like to amend.
Understood.
Okay. Just one more comment, and then I think you probably have enough from us. Do you?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
it sounds like there's consensus to at least take the next step into really diving into the analysis and to your city attorney's point, looking at what legal avenues you have and the legal requirements to potentially explore and the different incentives that we could potentially bring back. And I think this is really just setting the stage for the next exploratory stage, which is really diving into all of your options.
Okay, and so just one last comment that I had. You had stated convenience parking. I don't know how many of those restaurants now rely on, the Uber Eats or whatever that is. So that obviously is something to consider. And I know you're not redesigning but it's more of a vision. One of the challenges in the past, and Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, was the flooding in the parking. So I don't know what that looks like when you try to put seating, outdoor seating, where, historically that area has flooded, and what kind of investment that requires.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was ever brought to your attention.
Yes, drainage was definitely something that was brought to us during the focus groups and some of the open houses. And so hopefully when you're talking about making some major investments through structured parking in the rear, and then you're looking at different opportunities in the areas that's then opened up by relocating the surface parking, you would definitely have opportunities to look at solving some of the drainage issues. So that's definitely on our radar.
All right, so can you just tie this all up together for us and give us a timeline?
It sounds like we have the direction. The request for direction was to authorize the city manager and staff to further analyze the potential parking solutions and partnership or incentive opportunities, and then bring back to you those potential alternatives for further review and discussion. So again, not really making too many decisions at this point, and just letting staff take the next step into exploring what those potentials are.
Okay, great.
I'd like to mention another thing.
Please, go ahead.
Okay, we were talking about beach parking, but beach parking in Sunny Isles is really not for anyone that lives in Sunny Isles, the visitors. So, and I know we have a problem now on 174th Street. I've had many residents from Winston Parish calling me, asking that maybe there could be some type of permit set up or something in the windshield or stickers on the cars, because all of their spaces are being, because the garages, a lot of the garages are being worked on, and we have the on-street parking, and beachgoers are taking away resident spots. So we need to do some type of system, whatever, not to a large degree, but some type of system where code enforcement can go around and know that these cars that are parked there are beachgoers rather than residents.
Okay.
Understood.
All right.
Okay, so we're getting to the last part of our discussion here, which, just wait for the presentation to queue up again. So this will wrap up our time with you today. This is going to be the segment where we talk about the different benchmark locations that we shared with you for review, whether you were able to go to these places in person or have been to them, or if you were able to look around on Google Maps. We provided 5 different locations. These were provided to you based on previous discussions with the commission, and we also just wanted to provide a variety of different locations, so whether that's a variety in scale or the character, Not any one of these places got it right, and our intent isn't to copy and paste those places into Town Center North, right? But we wanted to have some common ground to discuss different features and aspects of these locations that you like or didn't like, that maybe are appropriate or inappropriate for Town Center North, just so we all are working kind of from the same information and we can talk about the same types of things. So again, no one of these is perfect, and certainly the intent is not to copy and paste this into Town Center North, but to just give us some common ground to talk about different projects and possibilities here. So we did provide a little questionnaire just to kind of give you some prompts and questions to think about. We didn't ask that you fill those out and give those to us, but hopefully you had a chance to take a look at some of these places. If you didn't, I'm just going to go through a quick couple slides, and then we're going to open it up for some discussion on different types of features and aspects, and we'll talk about that topic specifically, and then we'll close it, and then we'll talk about a new topic, and we'll try to stay very focused on the topic at hand, because we're going to talk about 5 or 6 different topics and don't want to keep you here all day, right? So the first location that we asked you to visit, again, either virtually or in person, was downtown Doral. I know we talked about that in this meeting a little bit already, but this is definitely a newer city center. It's a true city center that has a wide range of different uses, and really is kind of an entertainment district. There's some large towers set back on podiums, so at the ground level when you're walking down the main streets, there's just a single-story retail environment, and it's kind of hard to tell that there's towers pushed further back. But there are some larger, greater intensity uses surrounding the area. There's quite a large park area. There's the government center and other entertainment and non-residential uses. There's the public school, there's grocery stores, there's office and medical space, right? So certainly the scale's a lot larger when you start to look at especially the peripheral areas of the downtown, as opposed to just the main North and South Street in that 4-block area. But they've done a pretty good job at hiding the towers, especially on, again, that main street that runs east, west, north, south in the 4 blocks there. So there's some pretty good design aspects to talk about as it relates to downtown Doral. And here's some imagery from those main streets. Again, you can see those towers pushed back, and you really don't feel them at the ground level because of how they've designed the podium to be just a single story. Again, this is a place, we talked about easy parking. If you've been to downtown Doral, it's really easy to find a spot, get in the garage, even park on the street for some of the convenience parking. And they do have a pretty wide range of entertainment and restaurant uses here, and they cater to the nightlife a little bit here with some of their restaurants and entertainment uses. And then the next was Park Square in Aventura. I like to think of this as kind of a small but mighty neighborhood center. Geographically, it's pretty small, but they pack a lot into this area. As opposed to Doral, it's definitely more of a neighborhood serving area, as opposed to more of a regional city center here. But they have a wide range of uses, including an assisted living facility. They've got office space, some high-end fitness, residential, and a hotel. So they get a lot out of this little area. And here's some pictures at the ground level, just as a reminder as we get into the discussion. So definitely more contemporary. City Place up in West Palm Beach is kind of the quintessential city center in the South Florida area. If you've been recently, they've spent a lot of money and effort redesigning the facades to make it more modern. Before it was a lot of the pinks and oranges in the 90s, and now it's much different looking. They did a beautiful job renovating. But
What is that, about 8 stories?
I'm sorry?
That's about 8 stories, I think, if I remember.
The core of City Place tends to be about 3 stories and less, but to that point, with the redevelopment, especially on the edges, they're getting a lot more of the podium towers, so it's a little smaller at the ground level, and then some pretty tall towers around the edges of the City Place. So, of course, some kind of unique features in City Place, just that it's around the old church there and that pedestrian only kind of loop in the center, and they've also created a new pedestrian-only street for the large majority of times that you visit. So they continue to push the pedestrian-friendly atmosphere in City Place, trying to make it easier and easier for the pedestrians. Again, another place where they have a large number of structured garage opportunities. It's usually pretty easy to park. And if you go there now, there's all the construction, so it's maybe a little bit harder than typical or what it will be in the future. And then the town center in Miramar is a little bit different. This is, again, a very small 4-block town center that is anchored by their government center. So you'll see the axis there that terminates into City Hall along the lake there. This is kind of a long-awaited project. They put a lot of time and effort into gearing up for this redevelopment and this vision that they had, and it's pretty much built out now. They've wrapped up the construction of their newest building along Red Road there. It's largely a smaller scale. They have about 4 stories and less on most of the buildings, but there are some larger buildings, especially the newer one, I think goes up to about 8 stories. So you can see some of the imagery here and some of the taller buildings in the top left that have been recently built. They have a different mix of some restaurants. It's definitely more local serving. I don't think people are coming to this area necessarily from a big regional draw perspective, but it's a great spot for people to come for lunch and live and work in the area. And then downtown Dadeland is definitely one of the older options that we asked you to visit and take a look at. The interesting piece here is that they have the below grade parking. So there's underground parking in the Dadeland downtown area. It's very urban. There's not much green space to speak of, but they do have a range of scale and uses there. That goes up to kind of the mid-rise and then down to 3 stories with the residential in certain areas. So they definitely have a good variety of restaurants. It's pretty restaurant heavy here, and so here's some of the images of downtown Dadeland. So as we move into the back and forth discussion here about what you liked and didn't like and what works and doesn't work, just keep in mind for Town Center North specifically in your vision of the redevelopment scenario, where more so the knockdown, tear down redevelopment vision as opposed to what we talked about earlier, which was solving some smaller pieces and looking for infill opportunities and more of the beautification. This is really the 20-30 year redevelopment scenario where everything's a clean slate and there's maybe a total redevelopment of the area, right? So what does that look like and feel like? What's the overall character? What can you do when you visit Town Center North, and why are people coming to Town Center North, right? The original vision was that economic hub where it was an international destination, right? And we've heard that that's likely changed both from this commission and from the residents. So again, the residents really enjoy the fact that it's a neighborhood serving center now and that they can do some of their daily shopping. So, and then who's coming to Town Center North? Again, is it more of the local residents? Is it serving our immediate resident population, or is it more of that regional draw? And then of course, keeping in the back of our minds the commercial plazas in the residential neighborhood and the distinction and division between the two, and then the fact that renovation opportunities ultimately lead for redevelopment opportunities by better utilizing some of the land in the area in these centers in the Town Center North overall. So the first topic, we're going to talk about overall character. We're going to talk about scale and massing. We're going to talk about the mix of uses, street network and parking, open spaces, and public realm features. So those are the types of topics we're going to talk about. So again, we're going to try to keep it focused on the topic at hand, and then we're going to get into those other topics later as we continue our discussion. So we'll open it up for discussion on the overall character, so like the look and feel for each of the individual places, and we'll look to the commission to just give us some feedback on their thoughts of each of the different locations, or if they just had a favorite or a least favorite, or anything that you'd like to share with us about overall character.
Okay, Commissioner Stuyvesant, you want to start? No, none? Commissioner Joseph?
I'm waiting to hear from you, Ms. Mayor. You haven't
Commissioner
given your
Vizcarra?
vision.
Okay, so I'm familiar with some of the sites, and I visited a couple also, because I wanted to look at them through the lens of this homework assignment, right? Where are we, overall character? I like the renditions you gave us. I think that captured what we could be better than the examples that we saw. I think the closest to what Sunny Isles could look like would be the Aventura site, but I don't like it. I think it's very cramped. You say it packs a lot of punch, right? Like it's, but for me, I find that very overwhelming. It's very tight. I feel very claustrophobic about it. But comparing it to the other sites where you're working with a lot more space, and as much as I enjoyed them, I thought that they probably weren't very. It's hard for me to go to Miramar. I had lunch there, and I liked how quiet it was, how separate it was from the main traffic. It felt like a campus actually, and that it's anchored around government, and this massive garage which was free parking, and so I like those features. It was very welcoming. I just don't know how realistic a vision that is for us. I think a more realistic vision is probably Aventura, but it's so cramped. So if there could be a middle ground.
Yeah.
And also I'm like the worst person to ask in terms of spatial issues, so I have a very difficult time envisioning it through these different examples. But I liked the peaceful part of being, which I did not get in Aventura. In Aventura, you walk in, you don't know what garage to go into, and it's very tight, and people are parked where they're not supposed to be, and for me, it was a very stressful effort. Let me see. I think in terms of character, I didn't get the feeling of the openness, and that you mentioned something like there's plazas or whatever in the Aventura piece. Like I that didn't come through for me, but I did like it in Doral and in Miramar.
Okay.
But again, they're just working with different pieces. Right? So I like the sense of openness, even if you're surrounded by the shorter buildings, and the quiet and the being separated from traffic.
Great, thank you for that.
Okay.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I particularly like downtown Doral. I think they've done a good job. The challenge for us will be we don't have that type of space. But having said that, I think that, and based on on some of the mocks you showed us, it's got to be a mix of perhaps downtown Doral, town center with a park square. The issue I have with Aventura Park Square is that it is not a relaxing experience at all. It feels like the parking, then, there's cars trying to get in there, and they're waiting on the sides, and then you're trying to get down, and it feels a little bit too cramped. And we need to be very careful not to fall into that trap. And I know that we're looking at incentives to, some of these developers, so they develop this, but I want to be able to improve upon what we have and not get into a situation where we redevelop and then the final product is something that perhaps is not what we had in mind. That includes the density and intensity. So we need to be very careful. It needs to be what the residents had stated. It needs to be a calming and very neighborly experience. So given the space that we have, we need to see how we could accomplish that.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Did you want to add anything, Commissioner Sims? No? Commissioner Joseph?
No?
No? Yeah, for me, the same thing as Commissioner Viscara and Vice Mayor said. It would be great if we had the space, but we don't. And a lot of this is driven by, what is it that the property owner wants and the kind of businesses that are going to be attracted by this, because at the end of the day, they're there to make money. So, and I would like to see something very similar to Park Square, only because it feels like there's a lot you can do, and I agree, it's not necessarily calming, but it allows for, optimal use of the space. The idea, I think a lot of this just really revolves around the parking.
Mm-hmm.
The parking, once you can sort of get the parking right, everything else falls in place. Yeah, I wish we had more space. All right, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. It was
So,
good discussion.
Okay.
Yes.
yes, so actually, Park Square I'm not really happy with. The height seems to be too much for me and too confining. I would like to see some type of, if the plazas were to be redeveloped, a 2- or 3-story maximum, some type of inside-out environment, so that you feel like you're off Collins Avenue, really off Collins Avenue, however that might be able to be done. But I think that would be a scenario that residents would be quite happy with.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the next topic is the mix of uses that are available in each of the centers. Obviously, some had a greater variety of uses. Some were really kind of just residential and some retail. Some had less of the residential components. Obviously, some even had the government components and supermarkets and the hotel and ALF. So there were some that had a broader range of intensity in terms of the types of uses, and some that were more just some smaller scale restaurants and some residential. So if there was one that you particularly liked or didn't like, or combinations of the two as it relates to the types of things you could do and see when you went there, that'd be the next topic.
Okay, Commissioner Joseph,
Yes,
which one did you like the best?
Well, for me, I think we still have, on the east side, we have a couple of lots, if not 3 lots. And then we have other buildings that are going up, St. Regis, Bentley. So we're going to have a lot more people in our city than we have currently. And then with other ideas that are out there that we need to curb. But in any event, I can't see having any residential in our current plazas now. We just can't. Our infrastructure cannot support more residential housing.
Commissioner Stevenson? Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I like, again, downtown Doral, and, but we need to keep commercial and residential separate, for sure. Just because we're a narrow city, we don't have the streets, we don't have the infrastructure.
Commissioner Viscar?
Yeah. For this area, I would prefer to not have mixed use. Right? I like again, back to your renderings, and which is basically what we have. I know that's not necessarily what's allowed, but it's how it is, and if we could preserve that, that would be better. But if mixed use is what we have to include, then I like the like what I like about Doral, like, we really don't have great entertainment here, and I think we could benefit from having more entertainment. I like in Aventura, right, that's the one with the rooftop, with the active rooftop. That's a nice feature. Palm Beach has the pedestrian-only streets, so I think we need to always keep the pedestrian at the center of our conversations. We did not do a good job on Collins as we developed, and so we need to give our pedestrians an alternative to, where they can like walk and be without worrying about traffic, which goes back to having like that internal space right within buildings. Let's see. No, I really didn't have any great takeaways from Dadeland, and with Miramar, I like the variety of businesses that they had. They had salons, and they have a crema that's coming soon. So, and food, and but again, that one is structured more around government. So, I think that would be different for these lots. And I also like their use of shade and how they. I forget which one it was. I think it was Palm Beach, but where it's not just palm trees everywhere, but they use the more mature trees, a variety of vegetation. And in Miramar, the buildings have like the shade kind of they have like arches.
Mm-hmm.
You have the business, and then you have like a covered, it's part of the building, like arches, and then the open sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the wide sidewalk. So that's another one. So very wide sidewalks. And the built-in shade, or ensuring that there's, so I like the built-in shade in Miramar.
Great. Yeah, their arcade system is pretty nice there.
That's what it's called?
Yeah, the
Okay.
arcades and colonnades, yes.
There you go. I like that.
Yes. Great. Okay. Anything else on that one? Okay, so let's go to the scale and mass, right? So we talked about some of these, you'd see more of the single story at the ground floor, and then we call them the podium towers, or there's the podium and then the tower. So the podium being the single story, or single, 2, 3 stories, and then the towers being pushed back away from the street so that you don't see them and feel them as much when you're walking around the town center. Some of them are a little bit more straight up and down, and there's not kind of that pushback, but some of that's because they're more of the mid-rise and low-rise, and they don't have the tower components like downtown Doral and City Place does. And Dadeland kind of ranges from the 3 to 8 stories. The town center for Miramar was largely 3 and 4 stories, with some of the mid-rise, especially like I said in the newer buildings. Park Square is kind of all mid-rise. Downtown Doral has the podium with the pretty large towers. And then City Place, at the core, it's that 3 and 4 stories, but there's definitely towers with podiums on the edges, especially when you start to look at some of the new construction. So there's some discussion about the overall scale and mass, but also if you feel like the podium design helps, you kind of get around the concept of height, because like we talked about with the commercial centers especially, there's probably, if you were to really look at the redevelopment scenario where they're tearing things down and rebuilding, you're going to need some sort of intensity and density allowance for them to justify doing that, right? So if the podium design helps you with the scale and mass, that's something that we can certainly incorporate so that the towers are pushed back a little bit further and the pedestrian streets are kept at the 1, 2, 3 story type of scale, so that it feels a little bit more quaint when you're walking through the town center area. So scale and mass.
Vice Mayor?
No comment.
Okay. Commissioner Stuyvesant?
I think Doral did it amazingly. So at the beginning it's very short, and then in the back it's a little bit higher, or a lot higher. So I think they did a good job. Yeah.
Commissioner Joseph?
I'm a staunch supporter of, no more than 3 stories or 4 stories max anywhere in town center. So long live the Hernan Katz family, and may they own these shopping centers for 100 more years.
Okay. Commissioner Viscara?
Well, I would also prefer to keep things as low as possible, but again, if that's not in the cards, then yes, the setback version.
The street network and parking, we talked about the ease of parking being kind of key. A lot of these locations have what we call wrapped garages, so the garages are hidden at the center of the building, and then they have peripheral uses, whether it's residential units wrapping the upper stories and retail on the ground floor. Some of them have standalone garages, up in City Place, they have some standalone garages as well. And then the other thing to keep in mind is the grid network, right? So we talked about not wanting to necessarily establish any more of a street network or grid network in town center, that we like the kind of east and west division, and that anything going east to west should be pedestrian only in terms of additional access points, that we don't necessarily want to create additional vehicular access points, meaning gridding it out like maybe the original vision more so contemplated, right? So some of these, actually most of them have more of a traditional grid pattern. Some are a little bit smaller and maybe more walkable feeling. Others have larger grids and block systems, but and then the downtown Doral, or downtown Dadeland rather, has the below grade parking. Obviously that has its challenges, but it does have its benefits as well. City Place, again, has a lot of the wrap garages, but they do have a good amount of street parking, just like downtown Doral does as well. They have some of that convenience parking where you can pull up and parallel park, and Town Center in Miramar has that as well, which is helpful for the business owners, especially in the restaurants that want to have people pop in and grab their lunch and head out, and it just makes it a little bit more enticing to visit those places when you don't have to enter a garage every time, when there's a mix of surface convenience and garage parking. So if there's a type of, or if there's one location in terms of when you parked, your parking experience when you got there, if you were able to visit them, and then just as you were walking around, which streets kind of felt more comfortable to you in terms of their scale, and what it felt like just walking around or zooming around on Google. That'll be the next topic.
Okay. I think we spoke about this, but I want to give everyone an opportunity to say anything else. Commissioner Joseph, did you want to add anything?
Well, I'd just like to say that thank goodness that in this past election that we just got through, that the mayor's candidates did not win. Otherwise, we'd be having a totally different discussion today. So the residents should be happy for that, and I thank them all.
Commissioner Stuyvesant? Okay. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I mean, regarding pedestrian traffic and the ease of the pedestrian to be able to walk around, I think that's going to be paramount. And I'm just having a hard time. I'm not an architect. I'm not an engineer. God knows I'm not any of that. But I'm having a hard time with the space. How is this going to be, structured, I would say. I'm sure that, there's a solution to that. But yeah, I mean, definitely keep commercial towards the front where RK is the owner. And then in the back, I think the back is going to redevelop probably at a later stage. But yeah, we need to keep the parking structures at the sides, and obviously have some parking structures on the surface. But yeah, definitely it needs to be a calming experience where pedestrians are at the center of this.
Commissioner Viscara?
Largely echoing what the Vice Mayor just said, and I guess in summary, not Aventura.
Yeah.
Okay. Short and sweet. All right. Okay, and then moving in towards open space and public realm features, open space, you know, there's a wide range here, whether it's little parklets or plazas, or true playgrounds, right? So Dadeland's definitely, as I mentioned, a little bit more urban. There's really not much to speak of other than some different planters and things like that. I think they have a little fountain in the middle there. Downtown Doral obviously has quite a bit of integrated open space, and it ranges from kind of pedestrian pathways through the heart of the downtown to, again, true playgrounds and park space. City Place just revamped their kind of heart of the City Place with some additional kind of event space and flexible seating with the lawn area. It used to be more of the fountain area if you were there within the last 5-6 years, as opposed to within the last year they've changed that out. Town Center has kind of the corner condition plazas with the fountains and outdoor dining, and to the commissioner's point, some of the arcades and things like that that create their open space. And then Park Square, just being the fact that it's much smaller and more condensed, they lean more on the little pocket plazas and some of the linear spaces there. So quite a bit of range in terms of the types of open spaces that each of them have. Open space was one of the key pieces from the focus groups and the residents that they would like to see more of. Usable open spaces that were comfortable and off of Collins, so that they could sit and linger and enjoy just hanging out with friends or a meal.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Stevenson?
Yeah, as much as open space as possible and available will be the best, in my opinion.
Commissioner Joseph?
Well, I don't know, we have a small city, the area itself doesn't lend itself, even upon redevelopment, to, a lot of green areas or wasted areas, that don't lend itself to restaurants or other commercial buildings, but I think as far as sitting and meditation, we have a meditation garden that I want to bring up at another time, but I don't think it's being well utilized or used. So sitting spaces, I think we need. This whole project here, it has to do with what RK will do in the future. So this discussion really is what we'd like to see. I think a lot of it is just we're wasting time, except for the fact of the zoning parts of this. But the vision is going to be the RK's vision in the end.
Commissioner Viscara?
Big fan of the open spaces. I noticed in the different sites that the use of fountains, I think that's a nice thing for us as well, because we do have a lot of noise, like traffic noise, and I think the part, again, creating the calming effect, that also helps. The fountains can help with the like drowning out that noise. Open space makes it more family friendly, and again, going back to that neighborhood serving spirit, I think it's the way that we should go.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, fountains, they have a calming effect, and little plazas where people can like just sit and just shoot the breeze there, have conversations with neighbors, with friends. So definitely, yes.
Okay. And the last one kind of ties into that, the public realm features. So this is more of, to Commissioner Viscara's point, the kind of ground level treatment with the arcades and colonnades, or Again, some of the open space types of features, whether there's outdoor dining right on the sidewalks, just anything that you experienced as a visitor in these locations that you enjoyed walking past and engaging with, that made it kind of interesting to be there, you know, public art, all those types of things that kind of create a sense of destination and unique thumbprint on each of these locations. If there was anything that stood out that just kind of made it memorable to experience that place.
Yeah, I'd like to start by saying definitely seating with shade, but I think we also need to take into account the weather and how right now it's really nice out, so it seems like a really great option, but in a couple of months it will be almost impossible to sit outside. So spaces that take into account the weather, the rain, the flooding, but definitely shade is really, really important. Commissioner Joseph? Commissioner Stuyvesant?
I like the art portions, like Doral, etc. They have very nice art around, and I like also the art when the kids or adults can interact with. Like they can go on top of it. It doesn't have to be a playground, similar to what they have in the Aventura Mall, where they have like this structure, like these monkeys that the kids can go up and down. So it's not a playground, but it's meant for that. So whatever art portion can be incorporated is a big plus, in my opinion.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, for me, it'll be shade, art, and plants.
Commissioner Vizcarra?
No, I have nothing to add. It's been covered.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, so with that, that was your homework assignment, so we appreciate you participating and taking a look, whether you were able to visit in person or online, or you've already been there. This definitely helps us understand, again, a little bit better your vision and start to look at the existing regulations that will maybe potentially be amended to allow us to implement this vision along with the vision that's been set forth through the public process. So just as a reiteration here, this was the feedback that we talked about earlier today. I'm not sure if there's any last changes as we walked through this discussion today. If you thought of anything else that you'd like to add to this or change. Obviously, we took notes from the first time we talked about it, but if this discussion made you think of anything else, I just wanted to give you a last opportunity to say anything else in terms of just the overall vision. If anyone has anything?
No?
I think Beachy Village captures it.
Okay. Okay. So then our last slide here was one that we presented to you at the previous meeting, and these were some of the iterations or potential options that the commission could choose to move forward with in terms of revising the comprehensive plan and the zoning regulations. There's the first option, which was keeping the current comprehensive plan standards and revising the zoning to reflect. The impact of this would be likely to see limited redevelopment based on the lower FAR in the medium to high residential and the mixed use business, and the permitted density is below the average built condition in Town Center North currently. You're more likely to see rehab of structures versus total redevelopment, being the knockdown, tear down redevelopment, right? So we talked about both of those scenarios today, the redevelopment being some of the infill opportunities where you're structuring parking and opening up opportunities to maybe add an extra building or two and rethink some plaza spaces and things like that. And we also talked about the redevelopment scenario in the back half here, where we went through some of the different iterations with the benchmark locations, right? The second option was to keep the current zoning regulations and revise the comprehensive plan to reflect. This would be, the density is lower than the maximum density in the medium to high residential, which is legally acceptable because the zoning can be more restrictive than the comprehensive plan, but it would potentially limit redevelopment in the future accordingly. The third option that we presented and discussed was kind of a hybrid revision where you're revising both the comprehensive plan and the zoning regulations. to implement the revised vision that we've been talking about through these 2 workshops in the public engagement process. The 4th would be to reduce the intensity and density throughout town center to the maximum legal extent. Of course, the implications of that would be potential challenges by property owners, reduced development interest. Again, there's a give and take there, right?
Mayor, can I jump in? I'm sorry to
Please,
interrupt.
go ahead.
But this goes to your question, and I wanted to clarify. Definitely the east, we have to make corrections. I use kind of a very broad stroke when I refer to the west, because this does refer, and there are aspects of town center north that are inconsistent. Your code is inconsistent with the comp plan, so as this correctly states, you have the option of making your comp plan consistent with your code or your code consistent with your comp plan. So those would be required, but to the extent of visioning or adding things and all of that, that's purely something if you want to do. But there are some corrections that do need to be made. I wanted that to be clear. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you. So on 4, you're reducing the intensity and density to the maximum legal extent possible. That may be a different answer on a property by property basis, but that again would probably bring challenges by property owners and reduce development interest. Would potentially or most likely be the most publicly supported, and we've talked about looking at a market analysis to determine some sort of minimum redevelopment threshold. So what's the minimum intensity and density that you would need to grant to kind of tip into the redevelopment scenarios, as opposed to just kind of the renovation process. And then the last would be to increase the allowances beyond the current standard, which would probably incur more immediate redevelopment interest, but definitely be the least publicly supported. So with that, you know, there's probably sub-iterations of each of those that we presented, but this is the last kind of piece that we would be looking for direction on in terms of the vision. It sounds like, you know, there's still direction and desire to probably lean more towards the lesser intensity and density, especially in the residential portions, and keeping that distinction with the commercial and the residential properties there, you know, maybe treating the east and the west a little bit differently. So, you know, the balance will come with the commercial centers and the potential for redevelopment there, you know, how much the city wants to see those completely redeveloped versus just potentially renovate, right? Because the more you restrict the density and intensity on those parcels, the more you're gonna stay in the, well, let's just kind of fix up what we have, because it's not worth it to totally redevelop and see something completely new and maybe a little bit more in line with some of these other true town centers that we've seen, right? Versus if you give them that density and intensity, then they might be more inclined to kind of tear them down the next economic down cycle and come up with a brand new vision there. Yeah, these are the options that we've prepared for discussion, and if there's any further direction that the commission can provide or insights, that'll help us move forward with one of the options on the screen.
Commissioner Viscara?
Yeah, I think I would be, if I had to vote for one of these, I would vote for number 4.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, me too. I mean, you know, I understand that developers need to make money, but there's got to be a way where they can make money. I mean, as it is, our city is pretty hectic at this point, you know, so we need to protect the residents. We need to protect the pockets of calmness that we have. And I think that, you know, if, you know, I'm not an architect, I'm not an engineer, I'm not in the commercial space business, so, but there's got to be a way where we could either, you know, keep it the same or reduce the intensity and the density and intensity and still be beneficial for everybody.
Commissioner Joseph?
So I'm staunchly for 1 and 4. So that is, residents know I'm to protect the west side 100%. So 1 and 4 would be what I'm totally behind.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Stevenson?
I need more time to make a recommendation, but I will make sure to give it to the city manager's office so he can give you that feedback, okay? Thank you.
Yeah, I need a little bit more information because I'm leaning towards 4, but also 3. To have a better understanding of what it is we can do that's going to protect the west side, but at the same time, there are people that have apartments in that area that I want to make sure that they're part of this discussion if they haven't been already, if this in any way affects them. And it may not, so I need a little bit more time to review this.
And if I can add also, Mayor, when it states to legal extent, that's a moving target and it's very difficult.
Right.
Because the more you reduce density and intensity, the more challenges you're liable to face. There's not a magic number or a magic, analysis that's going to be able to determine, okay, where are we good and where are we not good. So you're going to have a greater risk with option 4 with potential challenges if you're going to make reductions across the board, just so that you're aware.
Right, that's why I was going with 4 and 3.
Yeah.
So it's based on, it would really be a combination, but we would be looking to you to give the recommendation because that's, of course, we understand that there are challenges with bird
Right, and it depends on the property, it depends, if there's if it's something that's going to be developed in the future versus something that's more immediately developable, there's a lot of factors that fall into play. But certainly there's aspects to, so currently, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I've looked at this too many times. I believe your FAR under the comp right now is limited to 2.0, correct?
Mickey's business it is.
Okay, so if you decide to go and your actual code provides for more than that, right? So that's part of the disparity that you have right now. So if you choose number 4, you're going to be sticking to 2 essentially.
Right.
Right, so that's going to create more of friction with the development community with regards to not being able to go over the 2.0 that's currently in your comp plan. So those are the types of ramifications of, and I'm not saying you shouldn't choose 4, but just understand that you're going to have more challenges with the lower density, lower intensity, or lowering that to the maximum low that you can hopefully, get away with. But it's very difficult to pinpoint what legal challenges you may or may not have.
Well, that's why we have you.
I can react to the challenges, but
Yes, I
it's hard to
understand.
predict.
Okay.
So I have a question
Go ahead.
for Ellen. So I know the state, we have upstate legislators who, have large swaths of land to develop, redevelop, and they don't, a lot of times don't take into consideration a city like Sunny Isles, where we're just so dense, and it's up to the commission to protect what we have so that we don't become like New York City. So I know we have regulations and laws that are going to come down that actually try to restrict the city that is so much like ours to build more, but are there any exemptions at all due to density intensity that we have currently?
No, I mean, that's typically, that is regulated at the local level, but a perfect example is Live Local, right? Senator Pizzo did a great speech, and I think he even mentioned Sunny Isles directly with regard to certain coastal communities where this would be so impactful versus others. It's said and it's argued by your representatives at the state level, but I don't know if that falls on deaf ears or not, but typically land development is a local, you're the local planning agency, that's usually a local issue. There's obviously restrictions on the state level, whether it's affordable housing or certain other aspects, but generally it's controlled, but you do have very strong property rights in Florida on the federal law and state law. You have the Burt-Harris Act, which is essentially, if you can't make out a takings claim under the federal guidelines or even state guidelines, we'll give you Burt-Harris, which will let you kind of claim the same thing. So that exposes you more because of the strong property rights you have in Florida. So it's not that you're preempted, but there are consequences to your land development regulations.
Well, at some point, I think we're gonna have to end up in court. I mean, at some point, there's going to be a developer that doesn't like what we're trying to do to protect our residents.
And that may be something that happens. You know, it could be an expensive proposition. My role is to tell you that the possibility is there.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the discussion. I know we kept you well past lunch here, and hopefully you're not too sick of us, because we will be back Friday for a discussion on the bonus structure within the land development code. So we'll be focusing solely on existing bonuses and potential modifications to the bonus structure.
And it'll be a shorter discussion, we promise.
Okay, and then in the meantime, before we close this, I had said in the beginning that there's no public comment, but I do encourage the public to send in any comments, questions. I believe the clerk's email is going to be on the screen. Reach out to us individually, reach out to the manager. This conversation is not over. This is still happening, and we still want people's feedback as much as possible. So, and thank you for all the work that you've done, and for the good questions.
Yeah, so
May
we
I
appreciate
give
it.
some homework
To whom?
to you, maybe,
Oh,
or the
okay.
city manager?
Please.
In anticipation of the bonus discussion, maybe it's already part of your notes, but I would like to get some examples of some of our existing buildings, like our tallest ones, and just tell us, this is what it is, this is what it would have been without the bonus, so that we can have some scale.
On the east side, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, have we given bonuses on the west? Like, maybe we have. So,
We, in the San Tropez, those areas, I think. Yeah.
just some examples so that we can appreciate what those bonuses mean in bricks.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So bonuses are not an entitlement, correct?
They're discretionary, that's correct.
Yes, okay. So I think some developers are not aware of that, and they assume that they have bonuses, that's a right, that it's a right. So
That's one of the changes we need to make in your code, because the way it's worded now, there's a shall in there that's problematic. They should be discretionary and not as of right, but they've been treated as of right, and that's one of the changes we need to make.
I do just want to provide a little bit of context with regard to Commissioner Vasquera's request. Previously, we had discussed with the commission, it was one of the first things we did, I guess, at the first workshop, is that on the east side, we were proposing to keep the amount of bonuses that were available. In other words, we weren't looking to reduce those, maybe restructuring them in terms of what a developer has to do to get them. But at the end of the day, you'd still be able to get on the east side of Collins that same intensity that you could get today. I just wanted to be clear about that, so that when we talk on Friday, we're really intending to talk about the structure of those bonuses as opposed to the total amount that can be awarded east of Collins.
So I had forgotten that, but still, my request is the same, just to have something visual to just to be able to visualize it.
Yeah, I think that Commissioner Viscar makes a very good point. It would be nice to have some, what if and what would have been, some sort of pictures would be great. Okay, so with that, we're going to adjourn, and we'll see you on Friday. Thank you.
Thank you.